Hello students, how are you all doing? I hope you're all doing fine and welcome to Glecta. I am your biology faculty and I am going to talk about a very common topic. This is something that you come through or go through every single day. There are incidences in our life when we go through a reflex arc and we don't even know about we're going through a reflex arc. Reflex arc is when you're trying to touch something, or for example you touch a hot stove. As soon as you try to touch it, it's going to burn your hand and your brain knows that. So your brain is going to convey signals to your muscles so that you can pull your hand back. Flinching away from somebody trying to hit you. For example, if I try to punch you, you naturally flinching away irrespective of if you wanted to move back or not is also reflex arc. If somebody pinches you, you moving away from that is also reflex arc. So this is something that we go through every single day. So let's understand and try to make sense of how your brain works when something is trying to hurt you and there is a stimuli, which is your outer environment trying to create changes in your own body. While talking about this lecture, I am going to talk about three things. First is what is a reflex. Second is how reflex work in your body. And the third one is why are reflexes important for your body. So let's get started. The first thing that you need to know about is an involuntary, which is also known as reflex, response does not involve any kind of conscious part of your brain as a coordinator. Which means if a reaction comes out of your body while somebody is trying to punch you, your conscious part of the brain, the one that is logical, the one that makes decisions, have nothing to do with it. Which means if I try to punch you and you flinch back or you move back because of it, is because of some unconscious part of your brain that are not involved in any kind of decision making. These are two examples. Sometimes doctors check like this if your body is working properly, if the reflexes of your body are working properly. What they do is they try to pin your knee with a hammer, which is a very small hammer of course, but they try to pin it on your knee so that your knee moves back. Now if you look at this, the leg is actually moving forward because the knee is here and knee is trying to move back. So naturally if you try to pull your knee back, your front foot will go upwards. In the second you see if the stove is hot and you're trying to touch it, your hand will naturally move off it, irrespective of if you realized it that it was hot or not. Talking about the other thing is that the awareness of a response having happened occurs after the response have been carried out. That's exactly what I said. If you try to touch something hot, you might not actually feel it in your skin that it was hot, but you will naturally flinch away from it because the brain part that is actually making the decision to move backwards is not the conscious part of the brain. So you might not even realize that it was hot, and even before that you will actually move back. Responses are therefore automatic and they're very rapid, and this helps to minimize any kind of damage to the body. This is how your body tries to protect you. If somebody is trying to hit you, your brain decides that I don't want to hurt my physical self, so I'm going to move back. If somebody is trying to pinch you, then also your body is going to move away from that kind of stimulation because the body wants to protect you. The third thing was an example of the stove. That's because your body doesn't want your skin cells, your skin of your hands to be burnt. Now this is an example that I'm taking so that you can understand what reflex arc is. Here's a pin. It's a thumb pin that's on the floor. This leg, whoever this person's leg is trying to move, and by mistake the person is almost on the verge of keeping his or her foot on the thumb pin. So my pin is going to be the stimulus. Stimulus is any kind of change in the environment due to which your body is trying to react. So any kind of sudden change in the environment that actually causes your body to react towards it is a stimulus. So in this case, your pin is a stimulus. Now, this is the leg and these are the nerves, the arrows, these are the muscles, and at last, this is the spinal cord. All these parts are involved in any other kind of reaction which is regarding your reflex arc. If your hand would have been involved in the same situation, the same things would have happened. Nerves of the hand, muscles of the hand, and then spinal cord. And at last, it's the brain. So the brain gets the information at the last. Your spinal cord is the main one that gets all the information from the body, and then it goes up your spinal cord. For say your hand is hurting, or you're trying to touch something hot, your hand will not ever directly send signals to your brain. Instead, what it would do, it would send signals to your spinal cord. Then your spinal cord will move them upwards in your brain. The unconscious part will decide what to do with it. Then it would come back down to the spinal cord, and then spinal cord will tell your muscles to do whatever they have to do. So talking about the pin, like I said, it's the stimulus because it is causing certain kind of reaction in the body, is detected by, now how do you detect it? It's a minor pain, it might be a minor pressure, or it might be your sense of touch. You do not necessarily have to feel pain so that a reflex arc can be generated. Like I said, in the case of touching a hot stove, you might not actually burn your skin, but you would feel it. So you might feel the heat because there are radiations of the heat. So you might feel the radiations of heat, and that would be enough for a reflex arc to be generated in your body. These are the receptors of the skin. Your skin has receptors to feel. I hope you all know that we have 5 senses. Those 5 senses are like receptors. Your eye receptors are working as much as your skin receptors are. Even your eye receptors can send certain signals to the brain. For example, if you see a snake right in front of you, your eye receptors will catch the picture of the snake, send it to the brain, and then brain will decide if you have to fight the snake or you have to run away from the situation. So that is also working. Other than that, your touch, smell, every other receptor, the 5 senses are working properly. That's how you have a healthy body. Now talking about the first kind of neurons that are involved. Now, because it's important for you to understand what a neuron is. A neuron is a cell that is specialized to carry information from one part of the body to the other. For example, a neuron looks like this. This head has dendrites that are going to receive signals. This is the cell body and the axon part. Axon part is the longest part. It is the fastest one to send any kind of signal. And at last, you have again finger-like projections that are your nerve endings. These nerve endings will be attached to the next dendrite, then next. So this is how you have a connection of neurons in your body. So one neuron will be at the receptor signals. It will carry the information to your spinal cord. Your spinal cord will send it to the brain will come back, and then your muscles will know what to do. So this is how it works. So neurons are the specialized cells to send signals. The first kind of neurons that the receptors are going to encounter are your sensory neurons. These are going to send electrical impulses to the spinal cord, which is the coordinator in this sense. Now talking about electrical impulses, your brain does not send chemical signals when talking about your neurons. Neurons in the body of the neuron has electrical impulses, but like I said, your dendrite and your nerve endings are attached. So first nerve ending and the second dendrites of the second neuron are attached to each other. Before transferring the signal, for example, this will have an electrical impulse because it's a part of neuron. This will also have an electrical impulse because it is also a part of neuron. But while you're transferring the signals from one nerve ending to the next dendrite, that is only the part when there's a chemical reaction. Otherwise, it is all electrical. Your body is capable of generating some amount of electricity. So that is the only kind of electricity that we have in our body, which is in the neurons. So what happened? Receptor got the stimulation. They send it to the neurons, which are sensory neurons. Sensory neurons traveled to the spinal cord. So this is where your sensory neurons actually entered the spinal cord. The next point is when your electrical impulses will be passed to a relay neuron in the spinal cord, and relay neuron will be attached to a motor neuron. So now what is happening? You see this orange color. This is your motor neuron. Motor neuron is present in the part where your spinal cord will be attached to the brain, and brain is sending signals. So the motor neuron is the part which is going to decide what to do. These are the neurons that are present in the coordinator part of your reflex arc. These neurons, relay neurons, are going to then send signals to motor neurons. Motor neurons are attached to muscles. So your muscles are going to retrieve back. Now every time that you move your hand, your muscles are involved. There's contraction and relaxation. So if you're trying to touch something, your muscles will be a little relaxed, but when you're trying to pull your hand back, your muscles will contract. So these motor neurons will tell the muscles to contract and move back, because whatever is in front of them is a stimulus, which is not a good stimulus. Then the motor neurons will carry the impulses to the muscles, which is an effector. Now, effector is the part of the body that is actually going to react because of that stimulus. The stimulus was the thumbprint. The effector is going to be the muscle that is going to contract so that your body part can move back. In this case, your thigh muscles will be contracting so that your leg can either move up or you can step backwards. So whatever it is, the stimulus is going to react with your muscles so that your muscles can move according to how to protect yourself from the stimulus. These muscles will contract and pull the foot up and away from the sharp object, which is the response your body is creating according to the stimuli that you have. And when these are stimulated by motor neurons. So one thing that you need to remember is there are 3 types of neurons. The third type, which is your motor neurons, are always attached to a certain kind of muscle that is going to respond to the stimuli. So let's talk about these neurons that are involved in reflex arc in detail. Like I said, there are 3 main types of neurons. The first one is the sensory neuron, then there's relay, and then at last there are motor neurons. These are your sensory neurons. These have a cell body in the middle of the axon. Not, I told you the standard, this was dendrites, cell body, axon, and at last there is your nerve endings. In this, your cell body is here, and this is your nerve endings. So this is like a sensory neuron. Talking about your relay neurons have a larger dendrites, smaller axon, and even larger nerve endings. And the last one, which is attached to your muscles, which is motor neuron, will have a normal body, but they will specifically will have myelinated axon, which is these yellow colored covering that would be present. So this is the difference. Let's talk about how they are different and what are the different particulars of these cells. So sensory neurons carry impulses from the sense organ, your skin cells, your brain, your eyes, your nose, all these senses, which are your 5 senses, and these senses will send certain signals. So sense organs will be in direct contact with your sensory neurons. So sense and sensory, I hope you can connect. And these will send the signals to your CNS, which is either your brain or spinal cord. Now, like I said, they will first go to the spinal cord, and then the spinal cord would send the signals to your brain. Sensory neurons are long, and the cell body is branching off in the middle of the axon. If you look at it here, there's no finger-like projections either for dendrite or for nerve ending, because your axon is the main part of the neuron. Talking about the second neuron, it is relay neurons. Relay neurons are found inside the CNS, which is either your spinal cord or your brain again. And these connect the sensory to the motor neurons. So these are like the middle part. This is bringing signals. This has to take the signals to the effector, which is your muscle. Relay neurons are in the middle to join your receiver and your sender. So this is like the messenger part. And relay neurons are short and have a small cell body at one end with many dendrites branching off it. Talking about your motor neurons, these are going to carry impulse from the CNS, again brain and spinal cord, to your effector. Your effectors are mostly muscles, but in cases like I told you the example of seeing a snake. So if you see a snake in front of you, there's no point of telling your muscles to move in that situation, unless you're trying to fight it, of course. But if that is not the case, if you're trying to, create certain amount of different reactions in your body, there are certain glands that will be stimulated. For example, in this particular case where your body is in the state of shock and is scared, there's a hormone that is released which is known as adrenal. Adrenal is released from the glands, and adrenal will decide for your body whether you have to fight for the snake or you have to run away from the situation. So your response is going to come after the hormone has been relieved or released from the gland. Motor neurons are long and they have a large cell body, and one end is long dendrites branching off it. Now coming to a very, very important part of your neuron. Like I said, the nerve endings of the first neuron and the dendrites of the second neuron are not really attached. They're not in connection with each other. So they have to have a phenomena through which they can actually transfer this information from the first neuron to the next, and this next has to also transfer the information to the other one. So how does that happen if they're not touching each other? That happens because of something which is known as synapses. Synapses is a part where your nerve endings and dendrites are connected. This part, they're not physically touching each other ever. Now imagine, because I want you to learn it right here, right now, I'm going to tell you if this has electrical impulses and this also has capacity to generate electrical impulses. If they're touched together, this part will be affected. I don't want my body cells to be affected because these are electrical impulses and your body is capable of getting electrically shocked. So you're not going to touch two things which are both capable of electricity. So you keep them a little apart so your body is safe, which is pretty much why we have synapses. There's a little gap between two neurons. So look at this. These are touching the cell body. If you see it from the outside, on the inside, this is what is happening. There's a little cleft in the middle so that they do not physically touch each other. So neurons never going to touch each other. They are separated by a junction or a gap which is known as synapses. Synaptic junction is incredibly small, which is like 10 nanometers. Now if you see 10 nanometers, it is 10 into 10 raised to power minus 9 meters. In size, an electrical impulse cannot cross them. So now, because these are small, but the electrical impulse is even smaller, because if your body generates a large amount of electrical impulse, you'll be shocked. You'll be shivering every second that you have a reflex arc working in your body, which is like impractical for your body to work like. So what is going to happen? These impulses are so small that they can't even cross that small junction. So they need to have functions of chemicals so that chemicals can move through the junctions. In the reflex arc, the synapses between the sensory and the relay neurons and then relay to your motor neurons are there, and there are chemicals that will be transferring information from the nerve ending of the first to the dendrites of the other or the cell body of the other. These chemicals are known as neurotransmitters. These are either going to be dopamine or serotonin. Dopamine is for your pleasure and your happiness and other kinds of moods related. Serotonin is also mood related. Dopamine is majorly for your pleasure part of the brain and also your logical part of the brain working. Serotonin is only for the moods. These are both released only when your mood is swinging a little. They are released in the synaptic cleft and diffuses across the concentration gradient. So these are going to release, for example, this is the nerve ending of the first one and this is the dendrite of the next one. From here, my finger will release certain chemicals. These chemicals will move from this finger and will enter the next dendrite or the cell body of the next cell, and these chemicals will then generate electrical impulse in the second neuron. The electrical impulses travel along the first axon, which is this hand, like this. They reach till the nerve endings. When the electrical impulses arrive at the end of the axon, this part, which is your nerve ending part, on the presynaptic neuron. Now, if this is the first synapse, this is presynaptic before synaptic cleft, and this is postsynaptic, which means after your synaptic cleft has ended. And these chemicals messengers will be released, which are known as neurotransmitters, are released from the vesicles. These are the vesicles. You can look at the GIF and try and understand what is happening. So there are chemicals that will be released from one part, which is your presynaptic, enter the next, which is your postsynaptic neuron. Neurotransmitter diffuses across the synaptic gap and bind with the receptor molecules. These molecules here are your receiver molecules or your receptor molecules of the membrane to the second neuron, known as the postsynaptic membrane of the next neuron. This stimulates the second neuron to generate electrical impulse and travel down the second axon. Then the second axon, for example, this is my first axon, the dendrites cell body, axon, then nerve endings. Nerve endings will have synaptic cleft with the second, then there is going to be another synaptic cleft in the other. So this goes on and on. It stops only when they've reached the brain, and then brain sends the signals again, then it reaches the muscles again or the glands again. That's where this information stops. Neurotransmitters. Now, first thing that you need to understand is these chemicals cannot be released at every second. Right, if your body has sent signals, for example, this is the first neuron, this is the second. The chemicals have been sent. You need to do something with those neurotransmitter or those chemicals so that those chemicals are not released again and again, producing the same kind of response all over again in your body. Otherwise, what will happen? For example, my brain or your nervous system and your neurons are now working properly. These chemicals will be released again and again and again. You would go into a what do you call it? It's like a, again, repeated reaction of the same thing. You will pull your hand back and back and back, because this kind of reaction is getting in your brain again and again and again because of continuous release of neurotransmitters. So what will we do of these neurotransmitters? We're supposed to destroy them, or either they're supposed to be recycled so that a same response is not carried forward in the second neuron twice. Synapses ensure that the impulses only travel in one direction, which is also logical. This has vesicles which will release neurotransmitters. This has acceptor regions or your receptors which are going to catch the neurotransmitters, which means once that is done, there is no going back. So we ensure that the reaction happens only in one direction and there is no confusion in which neuron has to do what. Avoiding the confusion within the nervous system if impulses were traveling in both directions. As this is the only part of the nervous system where the messengers are chemical, other than that, other part of the nervous system, in the neuron itself, for example, there is only chemical response, only electrical responses or your electrical impulses. This is the only part where your drugs and other kind of substances can actually affect your nervous system, because otherwise it is electrical. You can't take drugs and your electrical impulses will never be affected because of certain kind of drug that you took, because it's electrical. But when we talk about chemical, your drugs are capable of altering the kind of chemical reactions in your body, which is why this is the only part where your drugs can affect the nervous system. For example, this is where your heroin works, which is why you see hallucinations or you see certain kind of different kind of reactions in the body of the people who are consuming different kind of drugs, because here your neurotransmitters are not working properly, instead that drug is working. The other thing which is also logical is electrical impulses are faster, chemical reactions are little smaller, slower. So the chemical response is going to be slower in comparison to what your electrical impulses are. So this might be a very rapid reaction of your one neuron sending the information to the brain and that coming back in your body. But the part which is very, very slow in comparison to your electrical impulses is at the time when the synapses is happening and the neurotransmitters are released. Now this completes my topic. Now I want you to understand there are certain points that are very, very important when you talk about your exam, and there are points that you need to always remember whenever you're revising this topic in future. So the first topic is that your neurotransmitters are transmitted because of diffusion. There is diffusion happening. The first thing that you need to remember about diffusion is it is only going to happen if there is a concentration gradient. The diffusion only happens from high concentration to lower concentration. So which is pretty much why if this has to happen, if the neurotransmitters have to be released, you need to make sure the neurotransmitters in the presynaptic neuron are more than that are present in your postsynaptic neuron. The second thing that you need to remember is receptors in the postsynaptic neuron are very, very compatible with the kind of neurotransmitter that are going to be released in the presynaptic neuron. Why? Because they have to be released, and that because this neurotransmitter in the first neuron are only acceptable by the second one. If that doesn't happen, these chemicals can go anywhere in the body, which we don't want. So these are very, very compatible, and these are going to be very, very specific. The third point is that drugs like heroin, ecstasy and your cocaine are going to affect your brain because of these neurotransmitters that are present in your synaptic cleft. So this is the only region that can be affected by the drugs. The last point is that frequent use of drugs can actually confuse your body parts. These are actually going to affect the kind of neurotransmission that is going to happen, the kind of neurotransmitters that have to be released and the ones that have to be received. If that happens, your nervous system is going to be severely affected, because your brain is a computer, your body is a temple. If you try to alter it again and again and again, this place can actually confuse itself, because at the end of the day, a computer can also get confused. It hangs all the time. So you need to make sure that the drugs inside your body does not harm your body, which is pretty much why you study stuff like drug abuse, and you should not use drugs, because they're going to affect your nervous system. And if your nervous system is affected, your body will stop responding to any kind of change that is happening in the environment. Now, I would like you guys to start speaking to me. I would rather prefer that you turn your mics on and talk to me rather than commenting in the chat section, because that's more interactive. I would exactly know what you understood out of this lecture. While I give you the permission to talk, I'm also going to ask you the questions, so you can turn on your mics and reply to me while I ask you questions. So the first question is, how many neurons are involved in your reflex arc? Anyone? Asim, Binod, are you guys still there? Are you guys listening to me?
Yeah, is it 3 neurons?
3. There are 3. There is sensory, there is relay, and there is motor. There's only 3 types of neurons involved. The number of neurons can actually vary. So the answer is going to be 3. These kind of questions usually come in 1 marks, but you have to be very, very specific about the answer that you're giving, because if that answer alters a little, it is going to affect the marks. The next question is going to be about the same diagram, so you can look at the diagram properly. Try and understand the diagram. I'm giving you a second for that, and then you can answer the question. The question asks, what is the number 3, which is this. This is the stimuli. This is cactus. You're trying to touch the cactus. You're going to be pinched by it. It is going to poke your finger, and it can even make your finger bleed. So that is the kind of stimuli that you're having. This is your spinal cord. And the last one is that your muscle has moved away from it. So this is how it is going. Now you can figure it out and tell me what is 3. Francisco, you're really not replying. Can you please talk to me at least in the comment section if you want to? And Rida, I would want you to reply too. So start thinking about it.
Is it motor neuron?
Which neuron?
Motor neuron.
Motor neurons are here. Motor neurons, okay. I'm not sure. Okay, so I give you guys.
That's a sensory neuron.
Yes. That's exactly what I was supposed to say. So, how do you learn? Sensory, S. Sense organs, S. Motor, S. Muscles, S. Motors, M, and muscles is also M. So you learn it like that. Sense organs are going to be, from the sense organs, the connection will be sent by sensory neurons, SS, and when it is coming back, the signal is coming back to the muscles, so motor neurons will be involved, which is MM. So there's only one left, which is your relay neuron, which will be in your spinal cord or in your brain. So I hope now you guys can learn it. So the next question is about the same thing. It asks what 4 is. What kind of neuron is 4?
Relay.
Yes. Great. That is an intermediate neuron. In your questions, you can also write a relay neuron. The next question asks about what is 7. Yes. It is an effector. It is the muscle that is actually going to respond to your stimuli. The next question is about, it's again 7, I'm sorry. What is the gap between 3 and 4 called? So this is your 3 and this is your 4. Somewhere here there's going to be a gap. What is that gap called?
Is it synaptic cleft?
Yes, it is about synapse. You do not need to require and specify that it's a synaptic cleft, because this entire combination of presynaptic part and postsynaptic part along with the synaptic cleft together is known as a synapses. So you can only talk about a synapses. So this completes my topic and my lecture. I hope you guys understood it. You will get the notes on your email. You will get an email. You can go to the website and download the notes for this lecture. Then this is my main lecture that I gave you. I hope you guys understood it. Then if you're joining the classes, you're going to have revision and doubt sessions. In the revision sessions, we would actually try and concentrate on more towards your exam point of view. We would have only like flow charts or points to remember like stuff, rather than having an entire lecture again. Then you can ask your questions, and at last you're going to have your practice test and exams. Now if you guys have any question, you can turn on your mics and talk to me, or you can reply in the comment section. If not, I would like to give this lecture to your physics teacher. Okay, I take that as you've understood everything. I hope you're all well. Take care. Bye-bye.